Hello. Good morning. Freedom Land.
Freedom Land.
All right. My name is Jonathan Stith, and I'm the National Coordinator for the Alliance for Educational Justice. And it's a national network of youth organizing groups across the country who've been organizing to dismantle the school-to-prison pipeline. For the last 3 years, I've crisscrossed the United States surveying and gathering human rights violations of young people, of youth of African descent and education. And so my testimony begins that that youth of African descent have been systematically denied a right to an education through the school-to-prison pipeline, and their parents have been stripped of the right to self-determine the kind of education they're given to their children through privatization. The federal government, under federal No Child Left Behind, combined with zero tolerance policies created by state and local agencies, have produced an education crisis for youth of African descent in the United States called the school-to-prison pipeline. Youth of African descent have been criminalized in their classrooms, and their schools have been transformed into prisons. Since the ruling of Brown versus Board of Ed, we've seen the number of suspensions of African youth in the United States double. Between 2002 and 2006, there were 3 million suspensions and over 100,000 expulsions. And youth of African descent constitute the majority of those suspensions. And as early as preschool, we see that girls of African descent are suspended at higher rates than most boys. And the stats begin to show that young people of African descent chances of graduation are lower by 20% with every suspension. And in spite of showing that school crime nationally is in steep decline and virtually non-existent, the U.S. government has mounted to what we've assessed is a war on youth of African descent through increased police presence and the occupation of their schools. Between 1999 and 2005, the U.S. Department of Justice has funded more than $750 million into school police, placing 10,000 school officers in mostly schools where youth of African descent comprise the majority of students. This is the same program that funded the resource officer that was in the school that Nye Kenny attended in Richland, in South Carolina. Created by the National Defense Authorization Act of 1997, the Federal 1033 program has funneled $5.1 billion of military hardware from school defense law enforcement agencies. As of September 24th, more than 21 school police districts received military-grade weapons. We found in Los Angeles and other places that school police have gathered M16 weapons, bayonets, armored assault vehicles, grenade launchers, assault copters, and attack drones. This causes serious concern for us when we think about Soweto, South Africa, '76, where simple language access protests turned into a massacre. Particularly caught in the crosshairs of race and gender, young women of African descent are the fastest growing segment of the prison population in the United States, and they are most vulnerable of being pushed out, over-policed, and underprotected. In Florida, Kira Wilmot was arrested and charged for terrorism and later expelled for a botched science experiment. Brittany Overstreet in Florida was slammed twice into a lunchroom table and knocked unconscious by a resource officer and suffered a broken jaw, and was handcuffed and arrested for disrupting education while refusing to go with the administrator during the lunch. In Colorado Springs, Brianna Grimes and Talisha Miller, 2 honor roll students, were assaulted and arrested by Colorado Springs SWAT team and are later expelled for standing up to bullies, even though they had reported the bullying to school officials months prior. And in Texas, 12-year-old India Rush was arrested and expelled for abuse of a controlled substance when she shared her asthma inhaler with a classmate who was having an asthma attack. The second attack that we've seen on young people of African descent has been the systemic denial of their parents to determine the kind of education. We've seen through massive school closures and the privatization of black school districts that have been financed by the Federal Department of Education through its Race to the Top and school improvement grants, and state takeovers have seized control of democratically elected school boards, replacing them with mayoral or state-appointed school boards. In most cases, it places the hands in power in the hands of predominantly white state legislators and effectively disenfranchise black parents from self-determining the education their child receives. We've seen this all across the country. In 2005, we've seen over 100 school closings, and and of them, 87% of them were schools that were predominantly youth of African descent. And of the 101 school takeovers we've seen by state governments, 97 of them have been converted into charter, and 90% of them are serving predominantly African American youth. And Myron will talk about that and the fact that New Orleans has no public schools left in its school system. We've seen also deadly consequences as a result of privatization. In Chicago, 16-year-old Deron Alberts was killed from a rival neighborhood fight that brought two war neighborhoods together as a result of neighborhood school closings under Chicago's new schools and turnaround schools. LaPortia Massey was a 12-year-old Philadelphia middle schooler who died from asthma attack in school because there was no school nurse, because of the $543 million budget deficit manufactured by the state government, forcing massive school closures and firings, the same year the state approved the building of a $643 million prison. And so for us, and then for me personally, I was most affected by the death of George Carter, who was a young man from New Orleans who was an organizer after returning to New Orleans after Katrina. After being there for 5 years, he still had yet to open up a school in his neighborhood, and every morning he would catch the bus at 7 o'clock, and he was murdered while he was waiting for the bus one day in his school. So thank you.